most people here are familiar with Furlough Fridays in Hawaii, and if you weren't before, obviously you are now. What you might not be aware of is that furloughs are a nationwide problem. It's more than just education. They are having furloughs in local and state governments. Because of all the budget deficits, it has become a viable option in place of layoffs to simply instate a few furlough days and in that way save money. Now, I'd like to finish up today's presentation by looking at furloughs beyond the here and now, beyond Hawaii. And I would like to talk about the popularity of furloughs, their ineffectiveness, and the possible continuation of furloughs across the nation. Already, 21 of our 50 states have instated furloughs as a way to balance their state budgets. That is almost half of our states. Here on a chart from stateline.org, you can see all the states in blue have budget shortfalls. That is 43 states plus Washington, D.C. That is almost our entire country who is facing budget deficits and are really trying to make ends meet. For many of these, furloughs have been a really good option. Like I said, they're an alternative to layoffs. Although furloughs will decrease an individual's pay across the country anywhere from 0.5% to 15%, here in Hawaii it's about 13.8%. That is so much better than losing 100% of your income. To have maybe $30,000 a year coming in to all of a sudden none is a life-changing experience. So in comparison, to take a couple days off here and there doesn't seem like that big of a deal. However, or at the same time, it seems to solve budget problems. When you put furloughs on paper, when you're just looking at the straight numbers, it seems to fix the deficit. When you don't have to pay as much in salaries or wages, you can spend that money elsewhere, and the problem seems to be solved. Now, unfortunately, these furloughs are not that effective despite the best efforts of the states. It hurts individual government agencies as well as the larger local or state governments. In one way, furloughs do save money. Like I said, that's salaries and wages that do not have to be paid. However, they also lose a lot of money. One of these problems is lost income from revenue-raising services. When a government agency is closed, and it is a government agency that would normally bring in income, it is not able to do that. Take a library, for example. If a library closes, they do not have income from late fees or printing or whatever else the library charges for, and that money goes directly back to the library. So not only is the library losing employees and losing the opportunity to be open to its public, it's also losing revenue for itself. Now, another problem is lost productivity. One of the biggest issues that workers have had, other than the obvious cut in their salaries or wages, is that they simply have too much to do. When they have to take days off forcibly, they are not permitted to work in office or at home on those days. And at times, there is simply too much to do. Think of your busiest day of this week. It's a crazy week, so I'm sure everybody has a lot to do. Now think if you were not permitted to work on that day. You could not do any schoolwork, you could not open a textbook, read an email, study, nothing. You would be kind of lost. And that's the same problem that these workers are facing with the instated furloughs. Now there's also the problem of outsourcing. On governmentexecutive.com, I read about one organization in California. It's an engineering organization. And normally they hire state engineers. So engineers employed by the California state government. Now when they hire these engineers, their yearly salaries are about $103,000. However, when the furloughs are in place and these individuals are legally unable to work, they have to look to other sources to find their workers. And when they're looking outside of state engineers, they have to pay over twice those salaries. So instead of paying $103,000 a year for a state worker, they're paying around $232,000 a year to another engineer. So they're paying over twice as much for somebody to do the same job simply because the government isn't allowing these individuals to work. Finally, I'd like to talk about the possible continuation of furloughs. Like I said already, 21 states have furloughs, and ours is actually ending soon. We've had the 2009-2010 and the 2010-11 academic year of Furlough Fridays, which will luckily be ending in June. However, additional states across the country are considering furloughs, both in education and other government agencies, in order to solve their budget problems. Some of these states are Illinois, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Washington. Now, you may or may not remember, I'm from Minnesota, and it just so happens that both of my parents are state workers. My dad is a police officer, and my mom is a librarian in one of our public middle schools. Now, while furloughs may not affect my dad, for one, because he's retiring this June, but also because police and emergency responders are considered essential workers and are frequently not affected by furloughs, the furlough would absolutely affect my mom's job. Now, she's already taken a cut in her hours. She used to work 5 days a week, and now she's down to 4 because of budget deficits and Minnesota trying to balance their budget. So if Minnesota were to adopt furloughs as an option, she would take another hit to her hours and another reduction in income because of that. And it absolutely has the potential to cause problems, especially with my dad retiring. That's a lot less income coming in with his pension as opposed to his regular job. And if my mom's hours are cut, it's going to be even more difficult for my parents to make ends meet. Now, some areas are looking at creative solutions for the problems of furloughs. Jacksonville, Florida, according to MSNBC.com, is looking at an educational furlough similar to what Hawaii has had. Their biggest concern is what we've talked about, that the children will be the ones at a loss for this, that they will be having their education deprived of them. Now, because of this concern, they're looking at ways around that. And what Jacksonville, Florida has decided is that if they are forced to take these furlough days, they will be taking them on days that are not specified for school. So instead of here how we have a Friday or a Monday off, which would be a normal school day, they would only take furlough days on in-service days or training days or days that the students wouldn't normally come into school anyway. And in that way, they are trying to maintain their children's education and really, because children are our future, really keep moving forward in that hope for a better future. Now, obviously, we've talked a lot about Furlough Fridays. Sione did a great job of introducing the topic, telling us what Furlough Friday is and how it came to be here in Hawaii. Jocelyn covered all the effects for students and teachers, workers, parents, all sorts of people here in Hawaii. And I talked about furloughs beyond the here and now, their popularity across the country, their ineffectiveness, and the possibility for a continuation of the furloughs. Now, on an individual level, it's very hard for us to make a change in something like furloughs. We can't simply step in and balance the Hawaii state budget. It is not within our realm of skill, and even if it were, we would probably not be very welcomed. However, it is important to be informed about the world. Just as Dr. Burke says, every single day, effective communicators know what's happening in the world around them. So I hope that today, after listening to us, each and every one of you can consider yourself a little bit of a more effective communicator after hearing about Furlough Friday. Thanks.